everyone. Happy Friday. The weekend is here. You know what? Election season is less than 2 weeks away. Have we turned the economic corner? Is there enough good news out there or bad news? The SEC is laying it down on SolarWinds. And finally, we are going to fight for your right to cancel. You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel at Techstrong. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday Techstrong Gang edition. We've got some great topics to cover and some great people to cover them. Let me introduce you to our gang for today. First of all, I haven't seen him. I guess he's been out on a royal tour. Our czar of Silicon Valley, John Swartz. Hey John, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. It's been a while. I'm a little bit battling a vestige of a cold and I have some crappy Wi-Fi, but otherwise I'm terrific, and I can't wait for game one tonight.
I was just getting Yankees. Who are you kidding? You've been studying up, getting ready for the World Series.
Yes, I have. You know what? It's a classic World Series. The Yankees versus whoever they're
Dodgers.
Playing. I never uttered that name as a Giants fan. Never.
No. Well, you know, I saw an interesting video show on MLB Network, Yankees Dodgers World Series through the years. So they've played so many times.
I've seen that. It's an awesome documentary.
Yeah, they have footage of the 40s and 50s games. It's amazing.
For really you New Yorkers, is this called the subway? Is this a subway kind of?
No, no longer.
Very long subway between
extended subway.
No, them bums left Brooklyn a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a high-speed rail in this country, but no, it's not. But anyway, joining John and I today, also from Silicon Valley area, our marketing expert, leader, thought leader, and host, and everything else, Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, nice to see you.
Great to see you. Go Yankees.
Yeah, we got a heavy Yankees group here. Well, they're from San Francisco. What do you expect? Yeah. Speaking of Go Yankees, these next two people also have a geographic, well, one by marriage, a geographic affinity to the Yankees. Joining us, Camberley Bates from Futurum Group. Hey, Camberley, you want to explain that Yankee connection?
Oh, my husband's a Brooklyn boy. So we're in Colorado. He's been displaced, but it's the entire season. He's on his phone or watching the game. So I just consider myself a Yankee widow.
Okay, well, look, someone get this woman a Yankee hat. All right. Speaking of Yankees, Haley from the Bronx. He throws lefty, if that's righty. He's also the CTO at Visible Impact.
Yes.
Guy Currier. Hey, Guy, how are you?
I'm great. Great to be back here. Hate to break to everyone, but I might be the sole denizen of the Bronx who is a Mets fan.
Really? They must have beat you up.
What does that mean?
Did, huh?
Can you still against the Dodgers?
Well, as a Vikings fan on the NFL side, it just means I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
What was it like? Did something happen to you as a child?
Well, Vikings fan, Twins fan, a strong family affiliation with Minnesota, so I can't really support the Yankees over the Twins.
Shades of Harmon Killebrew. All right, we'll move on. He's a switch hitter. I think he is, but he's also now a season ticket holder for the Yankees, wearing his Yankee shirt. He's old. He's old. That's for the game already.
I pulled out my old Ricky Henderson glove.
Ricky Henderson.
Offers
so many great players.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to an awesome weekend of baseball.
Absolutely. I'm flying up to New York later today, and I actually had visions of staying over to Monday to catch a game. But sometimes the vision just doesn't work out. So I'm flying back home Sunday. I've got too much to do next week here. But anyway, enjoy. It's great to have you all on here. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of great topics to cover. One is about have we really turned the economic corner? And I have some thoughts on this one, but it's a good one. Why don't we start with that, Mike? What's it about?
Yeah, I mean, the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates, and I was at a BMC conference last week, and the CEO gave the keynote, and he led with this whole thing about saying, hey, economy is turning, IT organizations need to get ready now. We need to start building software that's going to be ready to roll out in 2025, because otherwise you're going to miss the boat. And I think we've been in a downturn for so long that maybe everybody's kind of missing the message. But Alan, what do you think is going on here?
So, look, clearly, not only did the Federal Reserve lower interest rates, they lowered it by 50 basis points, by 50 points, twice what was expected by some. And they said that they'll probably have 2 more interest rate cuts by the end of the year. So if those are your usual quarter point cuts, they're taking interest rates down a full point by the end of the year, with more to come perhaps in 2025. Inflation seems to be tamed. We're back in that 2.5, 2.3% range. Unemployment is low. Happy days are here again. The problem is, traditionally, IT is a lagging indicator of economic growth. We don't like to put that money in there till we see the gears going. By the same token, we're also a laggard in putting the brakes on when things don't go well, because we just think we're in a new paradigm and then it's just a momentary blip, right? So I happen to agree with Ayman Zari, who's the CEO at the BMC. I agree with him. I think now is the time. Q4, Q1, if you're on a calendar year, is the time to start making investments if you want to be able to ride the crest of that wave that's coming.
I think, you mentioned, I was going to jump in briefly. You look at some of the actions you've seen recently with Microsoft, Anthropic, ServiceNow, kind of upping their game in terms of Cisco, another one actually, agentic AI. So in a sense, I've talked to some of the executives at these companies, and they are of the same view as the BMC CEO, that there is going to be a turn in probably beginning of next year. So they're starting to make the investment. They're starting to act on actions. And so I actually do give that, what he says, credence. I actually kind of feel like a bit of a turn. And there has been exhaustion, as Mike mentions, this downturn and cutting back. I think actually we are kind of at the crest of kind of some growth, legitimate growth.
Are we kind of seeing some sort of issue with CIOs? Is this the time of year they need to go have this conversation with the board, or are they already having this conversation?
I think it already started. And the reason why I say that is because when we looked at the earnings that came out in September timeframe, July timeframe, we saw beginnings of an uptick of enterprise servers flowing. A couple of the vendors called it out, and specifically, I do remember Antonio talking about it, that they're saying this recovery on the enterprise side. The other side of it is we're going to starting to see the flow of AI PCs going, which means that there's investments in the AI side of the house. They'll have, expecting that a little bit of a slowdown still on the AI environment, is trying to absorb what they do have in the enterprise. There's still lots of flow going into the MSPs or the cloud providers in those devices, but the enterprises are still looking at how are they going to do this, how are they going to approach the space. But yes, I would agree with that. The only thing that I would caution us to watch is that the debt, consumer debt is up significantly. And that's the only thing that's the one thing to me that makes it, it's a caution as we go into this next year.
I think the perspective of the head of BMC, Syed, is a particularly helpful one for thinking about IT growth, because what does BMC produce? It's a lot of operations management, service management software doing forever. They have tons of experience and frankly data about what their customers are doing and in their data centers and with their IT landscapes, right? So, a little bit like some other operations companies, when companies are upgrading, investing, adding, even today, cloud resources, someone that filters up out of the field, the operations field, sales field, and everything, and it becomes an understood trend within BMC that I think has relevance for, at least on the enterprise side, the entire industry. So that's like a leading indicator of its own. That's maybe more soft data than hard data. But I think when the heads of these companies, ServiceNow would be another one, start talking about things in this way, it's really worth taking as pretty good anecdotal evidence.
I think another indicator, though, is investment in tech. And I don't think that has rebounded. As a matter of fact, I think I saw something like investment in security, which is a top priority, as it always is, was down 53% last quarter. 53%. Now, investment, usually the VCs invest on the, buy on the downturn, sell on the up, right? And so usually VCs invest when they think that trough is, they're trying to time it because they're all smarter than the average bear. And they're trying to time it, right when it starts heading up so they can ride it up.
Listen, do you think that the marketing folks are looking at all this right now and making a case, or will they be behind the curve?
I think they are looking at it right now. I think, to Camberley's point with the CIOs, I think the CMOs are evaluating this now and understanding how they can help this flywheel of from a DevOps perspective. I think there's a number of areas in which marketing can help from an alignment standpoint, because they're front and center with user feedback, kind of pulling that in, gathering requirements, and helping this flywheel to really go forward. So I think marketing can be kind of a cog in this wheel, and they are looking at that, and they're also reevaluating their investments, which we've seen go down over the last couple of years. So I think it's looking positive from the CMO's desk.
Alan, will some of these companies find themselves being left behind? I know everybody has a bad case of FOMO for AI, but I think maybe they should wake up and go, hey, by the time I start making my move, I'll have missed the train.
Mike, fortune favors the brave, but this is normal. It depends on your risk profile, depends on how do you feel about it? Do you agree that this is, that we're happy days are here again? I think there's a lot of people. Look at our elections, for Christmas sake, right? Half this country thinks we're in an American carnage. The other half thinks we should be joyful. It's no different. It's no different than here, right? This is what you're dealing with. And so no matter what you or I or any of us say, there's going to be a good chunk of CEOs and boards who are going to say, let's go slow here. And it may very well also depend on what happens with this election, right? Do we have a clear winner? Is there going to be nonsense involved? And, what effect is that going to have on the economy? There's so many variables here.
Right. Well, Camberley, I would just point out one thing I think that we can be optimistic about is, hey, maybe demand for IT expertise will increase in the 2025 and people will find it easier to get a job.
I don't think that's going to change from where we're at right now. I mean, I think it's the demand is there. The demand is, and it's in selected skills that are there. What we see is some of the application of AI into the IT roles. And that's going to continue as we get smarter how to use it. That will have that impact. We've also seen this last 2 years, maybe, you had this huge hiring during 20 and 21. And so now what they've done is cleaned back. You have these things like Google saying, if you don't move back into the building, you're out. And you have a bit of the same thing from AWS, and you have a few of the others. So now they're kind of moving towards that piece of it, bringing the people in. So there's a bit of looking at the staffing. Do I need that staffing? And I think that's normal processes. Going back to what Alan is saying, is I think we're going through that normal where we had that huge hire. Now we're getting back to maybe some, where it's we're really identifying what we need. The last thing I'll say about that is that the other thing that happened in the last 2 years is we're seeing a culling of the products in companies. They've looked at what their core products are, many of them have, and so they've spun off some of these things that they're not going to spend the money on, and saying, okay, so here's where I'm going to make my money. And that has an impact on staffing as well.
I think from a user's perspective, the question is, if I see these kinds of headlines or statements, the user, meaning the end user, the implementers, the adopters, what they probably want to know is, oh, does this mean that my budget is going to go up more than I expected? I've been fighting this fight for however long. Am I going to get more budget to hire staff? Am I going to get more budget to spend on cool software and infrastructure and whatnot? And I think it's probably fair to say that the answer is probably no. Certainly not as much as you would want, because I think there really is, there are all these constraints right now, thanks to this incredible demand for this thing. I'm going to use it first time, I think, in this conversation of AI, this thing of AI. So they were already trying to modernize and do cool things with cloud and all this stuff. Now they're supposed to add AI. So no one's going to have all these great new resources. A lot of our discussion here has been, how is this affecting the vendors and their sales and their ability to develop new products and be innovative and all that stuff? But I think the user perspective is really important as well, which is my budget may stay stable, or it might grow a little more than usual. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to have to make some kind of trade-offs and not do everything that I want to do.
I'm going to strike a more optimistic note. And I think that the budgets as written will be constrained, as you guys have said. But as we go along, I think the business units are going to be looking to take advantage of various opportunities, and we'll see more spending on IT in 2025, significantly more. I'll even go as far as to say it just won't be driven out of the CIO's budget.
I would agree.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
Mike Vizard with the good news.
Really bizarre. Feeling cognitive dissonance.
All right. Let's take a break. We're going to come back. The SEC laid down some wood on a couple of companies around the SolarWinds hack. We'll talk about that and what it means for you. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
All right, folks, we're back, and we're talking about our second federal agency that's having an impact on our lives. The SEC laid down some penalties against companies that apparently, from their perspective, did not disclose the full extent of the impact of the SolarWinds hack to their customers and to the government in general, and also investors. And I think Unisys is in that set, and a few others. I think Unisys was for $4 million, and the total number of fines was $7 million. It does raise a question, though, in my mind. Let's see, Alan, when was the whole SolarWinds hack? It was 4 years.
SolarWinds was about 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
I believe. So around January, almost 3 years ago now. I bet. I think it was around January of 2022.
So, are the wheels of justice maybe moving a little too slowly here, or it feels like this took forever?
So look. First of all, if you believe, the Verizon data breach report, we don't know about a hack, usually on average for 9 to 18 months after the hack anyway. This hack we knew about pretty quickly because of the terrible repercussions of it. But if you remember, Congress had hearings on this, right? Some people were called on the carpet. And there was a long forensic cycle of exactly how, this became, kind of the classic business school case of how a hack takes place and how it filters down the software supply chain and ultimately ends up with the repercussions that we saw. Now, look, let's not get crazy. This was 4 tech companies. As you said, Unisys was 4 million. The other 3 got roughly $1 million each, let's call it. And why did they get fined? For under, I don't want to say under-reporting, but under-disclosing the seriousness of the hack, right? And this goes back to something that back when the Congress had the will to do things, they weren't throwing out speakers left and right and all the other craziness we have now. They actually did pass a law that when if you had a breach, you had to disclose within a certain amount of time. You had to provide for credit monitoring and all of these things. We've all gotten those letters in the mail, I'm sure, right? And what the SEC is saying here, and the SEC had similar, especially for public companies, the SEC is saying these public companies didn't live up to the letter of that legislation, of those rules, which, they had to disclose the hack. And not just disclose the hack, but disclose details. What information was taken, whose information was taken, make an effort to reach out to those whose information was taken. And I think what happened here is, it's quite frankly, the SolarWinds thing happened. Microsoft, because, SolarWinds was, let's call them the third-party supplier that, 97% of the Fortune 500 was using. But that allowed a backdoor in to a lot of these other software vendors who were, who incorporated SolarWinds into their supply chain, Microsoft being a big part of it. Microsoft, if you remember Brad, I forget his name, the president of Microsoft, or the guy who was in charge of that. It wasn't Satya, it was Brad someone, I want to say Brad Park, but he was a Ranger defenseman in the 70s. But anyway, he got called on the carpet. And I think a lot of other companies then kind of just tried to minimize that. They didn't want to get painted with that brush. And they maybe disclosed that, they were part of that SolarWinds kind of thing, but they didn't fully disclose the nature of the repercussions, the breadth of it. And good for the SEC. Here's the lawyer, having gone to law school and done the lawyer thing. I'd like to see, are these companies going to appeal this to the courts? Because the courts have recently said the SEC has overstepped their bounds. If Congress hasn't specifically given them the authority for these kinds of fines and these kinds of enforcements, they have no right to fine these companies.
And I thought that they said they agreed to pay these. Is that
another person did?
Actually, I think Unisys did. Did the other one? For $1 million, it may not pay to, as silly as it sounds to individual people, for $1 million, it may not pay to appeal.
There you go.
Right? But I do think that is, I think the SEC it's hemmed in. If they go too high up, it does pay to fight these in court. And I'm not sure, given the current federal court, especially at the Supreme Court level, posture, that the SEC is in fact empowered to do this.
So the Microsoft president is Brad Smith, and he gets rolled out every time that Microsoft gets hauled in front of the government, and he's been doing that job for 30 years as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Guy.
Brad Park for the New York Rangers.
Yeah. Guy, let me get your opinion on this. I feel like there still isn't a standard set of rules for when you're supposed to disclose what if you have a breach. And I feel like it's still a little bit mushy out there in terms of, well, what am I supposed to share and how much can I keep secret? Because if I do share everything, am I not inviting more trouble?
Yeah, I think you're right. So it's interesting, Alan, that you bring in the courts. There's been a sort of a trend in the courts to shift, depending on how you look at it, shift the answers to such questions that Mike asked into either the courts or to legislators, because where this was the import, if you've heard about Chevron and how Chevron was partly overturned, Chevron was a rule that the Supreme Court set, or an interpretation that the Supreme Court set in the 80s, saying that where the law is a little vague, reasonable interpretations by agencies like the SECs are allowed to rule. And then just this year, the Supreme Court said, no, wait a minute, that's actually not true. And was actually, frankly, I think objectively speaking, vague this year in that ruling, in saying what's supposed to be done other than enacting more well-defined regulations, which, Mike, in a case like this, security, it's almost a trope. We talk about it all the time. Cybersecurity, things are changing all the time. New modes of attack. You can't get too specific. You need a deeper understanding in order to really sort of figure this sort of thing out. So where does that leave us? It kind of does leave us, as Alan said, towards going into the court. But if you, like myself, feel that you want some experts who will still make mistakes and get things wrong, but have the expertise to more often get them right than the court or even legislators, if you want them to do their best to interpret, laws that are not specific enough. In this case, I think the governing law doesn't mention cybersecurity specifically. It's just talking about material things that affect the material outcomes for a company, right? And I would say that things like breaches and potential disclosure of personal information have a material effect on the profitability of Unisys. And so that's within scope. That's my unexpert opinion. So yeah, it's all very mushy and becomes this sort of political question until the day that one of these things really affects, a whole swath of affluent Americans, frankly, in a negative sense, in which case, the winds could turn in the other way. So it's mushiness upon mushiness.
Yeah, the big question that I had with this is, as I read some of the materials, and I am not an expert at all in this, but my question was, what was the material impact? How did the Unisys lack of whatever, disclosure impact their earnings or whatever there was? What was the material impact here? And that was very unclear in everything that I could read that was publicly released.
Well, is damage to your brand a material impact?
Yes.
I think it probably is. And it's what we talk
Absolutely.
about a lot. But that's arguable.
As opposed to breach is not the permanent damage to your brand.
Yeah, I mean, the entire federal government was shut. Half the federal government was shut down because of SolarWinds.
Well, so maybe they canceled a couple of Unisys contracts, or maybe they didn't. I mean, what is the material?
They did.
No, they didn't.
They did it. But here's the thing. Guy, you mentioned it before. Under the Chevron case, and I don't want to get legal beagle, but under the Chevron case, the SEC was given some broad powers to interpret. The disclosure laws were not just about the financial impact on the public stock price of a public company, but it was on that public company's duty to disclose to their customers, right? And there were specific things that need to be disclosed. What information of yours may have been exposed or was definitely exposed, right? But usually it's may have been exposed. What you can do to protect yourself, offering free credit monitoring or something like that, because it wasn't just that the federal government was brought down, that supply chain attack, the SolarWinds attack there were very specific targets that they went after that didn't just bring stuff down, but allowed access. It was a back door into things.
So the question I would have, Alan, is that an FTC issue? Or is that FTC?
Well, it's not an FTC issue. It's, for whatever reason, the SEC stepped up when these cyber laws where Congress was doing something and the I don't even remember what administration it was. It might have been Obama, it might have been W. Bush, or even before to Clinton. But whenever that came into effect, it wasn't Clinton. Whenever that came into effect, the SEC stepped up and they made it just. And I always remember thinking, why did they? So they only did this for public companies. Why? What about non-public companies? Great, because the FTC doesn't deal with non-public companies.
Here's what I think needs to happen. You know what? Just like we have the National Transportation Safety Board shows up every time there's a train crash, plane crash, or whatever else. If there's a major cybersecurity incident, we need the equivalent of a body who doesn't have a particular dog in the race to just come in and do the analysis of this thing and say, here's the official record of what happened. Here's what the damages there were. And then if people want to sue each other, whatever, that's fine. And they can do whatever they need to do. But right now, it's too mushy. And so I don't see how any of the analysis stands up, even if you look at all the reports, because it's just like, well, what was the damage? What exactly did happen? And who was responsible?
But if you're going to put teeth in a disclosure law, it's the question of who has teeth.
I say we need a new dog with teeth.
Just what we need, another federal agency.
A better federal agency.
No. Be one of the existing federal agencies. I knew this would be the FTC.
I think it would be.
But now you're putting a regulatory role on the FTC that might be similar to what, which I'm losing my mind with these acronyms. The one that governs, air travel and stuff.
Federal Aviation Commission.
Yeah, FAC.
Yeah.
In any case, to give them a role, Alan, that would be somewhat similar.
To do
sounds pretty extreme
to
me as well.
You need a specific act of Congress to empower them to do that under the current Supreme Court ruling.
Yep.
We don't have a Congress that they could barely pass a budget.
They didn't actually.
They didn't.
So, there you go.
They can't keep a speaker, So there's all pie in the sky. Look, maybe the EU will do something about it.
I say we turn those CISA people loose, give them the money, and let them do the job.
But they're not empowered. CISA's not empowered by Congress either. You need a congressional.
I do.
You
need a bill. We need some legislation and maybe some actual leadership.
So now, while we have a minute, though, I would love to hear Lisa's perspective on this, because we're sort of saying it's like a wish list of things that could happen. Mike, you're being very optimistic. This podcast is very disorienting. I'm thinking that these are essentially public communications exercises that the SEC happens to be the intervening agency in. So, Lisa, when we're talking about the market of ideas and the market of commerce and all that other sort of stuff, that's the only controls that we have. How is that operating?
It's mushy there as well, I would say. I think what the SEC is doing here may be making examples out of these four companies. For example, Unisys they call the breach hypothetical, which is very misleading to shareholders. I think what we need help with is brand reputation management for these organizations, to make sure that the shareholders are assuaged based on these concerns that these scapegoats might be leading in that space. But I think, to all of your point, there's ambiguity with this from an enforcement perspective. I think from a messaging standpoint, that's where marketing can come in and help. Now, I was looking at the statements by these four organizations that were fined to try to understand, well, how did who crafted this message? And I think it's not a marketing issue. I think it's an executive leadership team collaborative discussion. Maybe it's a board discussion about what they're going to say, what they're going to disclose. And now ultimately, I think what they need to do is move forward, managing their brands well and ensuring that they can assuage, to the best of their abilities, concerns when the next one happens.
I mean, the other thing to remember is, look, as Camberley pointed out, all these firms sort of agreed to pay their fines and not appeal. I'm sure there was a negotiation there, right? Maybe the fines were lowered. It was, and even quite frankly, $4 million for a company like Unisys it's a slap on the wrist. This isn't, material. So it is what it is. And I think we have to recognize that for what it is. But, the government could say, we did something about that SolarWinds thing. Companies got to get real about disclosure. We're going to get real here and take a break on Techstrong Gang. Let's come back and talk about fight for your right to cancel subscriptions on Techstrong Gang.
All right. And then our third government agency, the FTC, is out saying, hey, you have a right to cancel your subscriptions, and it should be easy as it was to actually subscribe in the first place. On the face of it, sounds pretty reasonable. Lisa, what are the marketing community saying about all this? Because a lot of this effort usually involves like, hey, come sign up for my little service here. Oh, you want to leave? There's no button for that.
Exactly. That's the challenge, is the fact that it's so challenging to cancel subscriptions or to avoid kind of the sneaky auto enrollment. Now, a lot of that's driven by marketing. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. I think it will please the consumers of the products and services to be able to cancel something easily. It also will affect the revenue of the company. Marketing has to do a dance there to make sure that the benefits and the risks are balanced, if you will. I'm pro the fight for your right to cancel, because I don't even want to know how many subscriptions I have that I never use. Or I signed up for HBO Max because I wanted to watch something, and 2 years go by and I'm still paying for it. It reminds me of this Friends episode where Chandler goes to cancel his gym membership and ends up with a joint checking account with Ross because I can't say no. 25 years later, we're still having these challenges. But I think it is a positive for the consumer. And ultimately, when the consumer wins, the brands win too. It's not necessarily a direct correlation, and it's not necessarily immediate, but I think this could be a win-win.
I say about damn time, because this is a major PIA, right? I do remember that Friends episode, Lisa. That was a good one too. I miss Chandler. I miss Ross also. I think I miss Rachel more. But anyway, the point is this. I've moved to most of my app subscriptions, like a Max or something like that. I buy through Apple, because Apple does give you, when you go into my Apple account or whatever, there's a button there that says subscriptions, and it lists every subscription that people are banging your Apple on, your Apple account, and you can just hit do not auto renew, cancel, right? And it automatically does that for you. On top of that, there's a whole cottage industry. I've seen TV commercials. I sound like a politician. I saw it on TV. Anyway, I've seen TV commercials for an app that will actually, I guess, go into your bank account and look at, reoccurring charges and treat those as subscriptions, and allow you to manage them better, because this is a real problem for people. It's $9 here, $90 here, $40. Before you know it, you're talking real money.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the dreaded 7-day free trial. Nothing is free, right? So you sign up for that free trial, and then good luck. A lot of these places, they make you put your credit card in with the free trial. And then, they charge you, and then you write them and say, hey, I canceled. Well, no, we don't have record of that. And good luck. So again, for $14.99, how much are you willing to fight? And then you say, okay, well, make sure you don't charge me next month. And this is a long time coming. And again, not to get on a soapbox, but this is the kind of stuff that Elizabeth Warren has been talking about in terms of a consumer rights kind of panel for a long time. We need the FTC and the other agencies to be doing these kinds of things to protect us from. And it's not unscrupulous. I'm not saying these companies are. Some of them are very legitimate, good companies. It's just bad business.
Hey,
it's bad business.
Hey, one of the great things about losing your credit card is you start getting emails from these people telling you, hey, your credit card did not renew. And
well, that was another way of doing it. Yeah.
And then you're like, who are these people? And get off my account. So,
what?
You bring up a good point, Alan, about the cottage industry. I think it's Rocket. That's one of the commercials that I've seen that it will actually, you just subscribe to that, I imagine, or you pay for that service to then find all of the recurring transactions, to your point. So it's interesting that it's opened up this other industry for organizations to monetize services to help people get, subscriptions canceled. I agree with you completely. I think it's about time. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds and how quickly the consumers actually are able to benefit from this.
Well,
another industry with more cost.
Okay, so I don't think it's just the consumer. Literally, we've got a lab, right? No, I have to bring up the lab here. And the lab uses AWS Azure services for doing testing, and we will set it up. And, I have more than, as, I was business leader for the other company, and more than I don't know how many times I'd walk into, Russ Fellows, who runs the lab over there. And I said, what the heck is this charge? He goes, I thought we canceled it. And I'm like, and it's going back there. So, we have an entire industry that is in your CIO's department that is monitoring those billings coming from AWS and Azure and trying to figure out how to cancel it. And it was difficult. There was still some carry on. And that is what we did. We closed down a credit card.
That's exactly what we did.
It was the only way we could get rid of it. We finally closed it down. We got rid of it, and they, signed up for the other stuff on the other things that we wanted.
We did the same thing because at Techstrong, you signed up for some marketing program, and then, you used it for about 2 months, and then no one uses it. And then all of a sudden you get a $399 or $999 charge as it auto-renewed. You call them up and say, we haven't used this in 6 months. We don't want to renew it. Well, very sorry. You had to give us 30 days notice on your non-renewal. You never even told us it was renewing. Oh, if you read paragraph 16, we don't give you any notice. You knew that when you signed up a year ago. And so once the credit card was changed, now they call you up and say your credit card didn't come through. I'd say, well, too bad.
So hang on, Mike, do you want to say something optimistic? Because I'm about to go all doom and gloom on everybody.
Go for it. I was counting on it.
Yeah, first of all, completely agree with you, Alan. It's about damn time and the general sentiment here. But I think I want to focus the about damn time on just the announcement by the current administration and the setting of the rule, because this rule is going to maybe last a little longer than a snowflake in hell or whatever, but not much longer than that. The lawsuit was filed in the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit is a notoriously anti-agency action, anti-regulation group. I think an injunction will be coming extremely quickly. And it's this sort of thing, I guess, gets filed in the Court of Appeals instead of a district court. So, just in short order, this is going to make it to the Supreme Court and the whole thing's going to be smothered. I'm quite certain of that on numerous grounds, but mostly I'm just going on how the courts have acted. There's a reason that this was filed in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, because if it was filed in D.C., it would be a completely different story based on the composition and history.
Texas one?
Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma. I think that it
They're
properly
still fighting
belongs
over the
in,
Drew Scott decision there.
Yeah, I think it properly belongs in D.C. because this is national and it's a federal agency and everything. But apparently, this is how we play the courts right now.
You couldn't stop it.
But making the announcement, which I think, if you cynically believe, I'm not quite such a cynic as I often sound, but if you cynically believe that this was an announcement made prior to an election, you get people more on the Democrat side, because it's the current administration. I think there may be some truth to that, but I don't care, because putting this issue into the public discourse is what it is about damn time happened. We have all had these experiences. Lisa is completely right, in my opinion, 100% right, that it hurts your brand. Ultimately, it hurts your go-to-market. It hurts what you're trying to do, which is be profitable and grow, to make it hard for people to leave. You're right that the business incentives inside these organizations, but the VP in charge of unsubscribing or whatever is, incentivized to keep people from unsubscribing. And this is one of the many tricks they're allowed to use to do that. And the last thing I'll say is it's really significant to me. The parties, there's three different industry groups, and filing the suit. And the one that's least discussed is the IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Just think about that. The Interactive Advertising Bureau, their job is to hook people in and to track them and do all of these things. And that does hurt that business. And I say, amen. We need to have a more open, frictionless economic system that allows people to come and go, do what they want to do, stop doing when they want to stop doing it, and have remediation when there's difficulty there. So I like the idea of, I think it's Rocket Money or something like that you were talking about, Lisa, that has this way of finding all your subscriptions, and right? But that's more friction and more actors in a system that should be spelled.
I mean, take a cue from the GDPR, right? If you're a European citizen, and we get these emails all the time, my name is Guy Currier. They could say, I want you to remove all of my records from your system, or I want you to remove these pieces of my identity and, be made private. I could have all, some, or none, right? And all I got to do is send an email. And if you don't respond in 7 days or whatever it is, I go to the governing authority in the EU, and all of a sudden, there are, like, I think 10% of your revenue is at stake or something if you don't follow the GDPR. But there they have political will to get things done.
So let me ask you a question. Maybe what percentage of the revenue is being generated by these so-called services that is called hosting revenue?
That's a good chunk of.
And so how many of them are not nearly as valuable or as healthy as people think, because they just have, a boatload of revenue that is not really renewed in any meaningful way, at least not with the intent required. And I think there's going to be a conversation about that in the near future from the Wall Street side, going, a lot of these companies are shaky, is all there is to it.
And I think that's the measurement that they report on, the public companies report on. They're going to report on their ARR, but they're also going to report on the renewals of there, and that's very, very important.
Right. 92% of our customers stay with us, or 98%,
right. And so, I mean, on one hand, we're talking about the consumer, the $9.99 subscription. On the other hand, I was talking about things that were in the thousands of dollars, not $9.99. And even at that, it was difficult to do something rather. And if you've ever worked with the telcos, who was the other people that filed as well, I think, believe in the lawsuits, they are notoriously difficult to manage. Now, they've gotten better over the years, and as I've dealt with the telcos on a corporate basis, we've seen them a whole lot easier, but we all have the privilege of dealing with the cable companies, those kind of guys in some ways. You don't want to hit your head up against the wall when you go through that process. So I agree, we need this. The one dissenting, or there was two dissenters in the FCC, they were more talking about more the quality of the descriptions of what is a violation. And what the dissent was saying is saying we need this, but this is not defined enough for people to be able to thread the needle to say, just like we were talking about earlier on this cybersecurity thing, what is really a violation and what is not a violation. And, I'm not an expert on this. I mean, Lisa, you probably would know far more than I do in terms of, some of the items that are going on with that. But that seems to be where a valid criticism could be in terms of what just got, the regulation that just got set up.
All right. I would just note one thing. If you were running for office somewhere, do note that this is an issue that regardless of what your favorite color is, everybody hates.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can I, in a similar vein, I want to bring up one thing and then I got a letter the other day from some parking company here in Delray Beach, Florida, that has a picture of, I think it's my car, parked in a spot, saying that the car was not allowed to be parked there, and they want me to pay $77. They're not affiliated with any local government. They don't pretend to be. Their only enforcement mechanism is if you don't pay us, we're going to the credit agencies on you, right? That's their big stick. And we all know what it's like dealing with them. I'm sorry,
there
what, Camberley?
There is a scam that's going around on that. So I came across on the news or someplace, it said this is a scam that's happening.
Yeah. Well, I went on site to dispute it because we had gone to the iPic movie theater, which has valet parking, and they said if you park on the third floor, it's free. And I went all the way up to the third floor and parked. I'm going to fight this. I'll keep you all posted of what it is. But this isn't even governmental. This is private industry trying to shake you down, right? Hey, I'm parked illegally, tow me. Slap a sticker on the car. Don't send me a letter a month later, trying to shake me down for money. That's not going to work. So anyway, as John Belushi would say, they're smoking in the streets of Mexico, but not here. But no. We're going to end our Techstrong Gang on this lovely Friday. Hey, whether you're a Dodger fan or a Yankee fan, I hope you enjoy the World Series this weekend, as well as football and all the other great sports going on out there. Try to get out, though. Enjoy if the weather's still nice where you are. Enjoy the weather. We have a full day of Techstrong TV following this, and we'll be back Monday with more great stuff here on Techstrong Gang. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.